following session titled The Classroom Catechism, the Song of the Heart, Mind, and Body, will be presented by Elizabeth Ahlman, who served at Memorial Lutheran Church and School in Houston, and as the English and Humane Letters teacher for the upper school. Please welcome Deaconess Ahlman.
Thank you. You have to stand up. I will ask the questions and you will answer them. So we are actually going to do what we're talking about. Who are you?
I am a created human being who was created by God the Father, the creator of the heavens and the earth. I am a redeemed child of God on account of the grace and merits of Jesus Christ.
On account of who you are in Christ, how do you comport yourself?
I strive for love, faithfulness, honor, truth, and excellence.
What are the effects of dishonor and deception?
Foul whisperings are abroad, unnatural deeds to breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their deaf pillows will discharge their secrets. More needs she the divine than the physician. God, forgive us all. Look after her, remove from her the means of all annoyance, and still keep eyes upon her. So good night, my mind she has taken, and dazed my sight. I think, but dare not speak.
Macbeth, Act 5, Scene 1, lines 61 through 69. Apart from Christ and his goodness, what is the end result of life?
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools away to dusty death. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a war glare that struts and frets its hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Macbeth, Act 5, Scene 5, lines 19 through 28.
What forces tempt the Christian to such a view of life? In
often wars down through the mist sands, God cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey on high wall. Under the cloud murk he moved towards it, until it shone above him, a sheer heap of fortified gold. Nor was that the first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life, before or since, did he find harder fortune or wall defenders. Spurred and joyless, he journeyed on ahead, and arrived at the pond. The iron brazed door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the iron floor with his loathsome tread, while a baleful light, flaming more than light, flared from his eyes. He saw many men in the mansion sleeping, a ranked company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together, and his glee was demonic, picturing the mayhem. Before morning he would rip life from limb and devour them, feeding on their flesh. But his fate that night was due to change. His days of ravening had come to an end. Bearable 5:7-10-7:35.
How do we withstand?
O my beloved Master, my guide and herald, who time and time again has seen me safely along this way and turned the power of evil, stand by me now, my bride, in my heart's fright, and if the dead forbid our journey to them, let us go back together toward the light. My guide, then, in the greatness of his spirit, take heart. Nothing can take our passage from us when such a power has given warrant for it. Wait here and feed your soul while I am gone on comfort and good hope. I will not leave you to wander in this underworld alone. The Inferno, Canto 8, lines 94 to 105.
What does faithfulness look like?
Sam looked at him and wept in his heart, but no tears came to his dry and singing eyes. I said I'd carry him if it were my back, he murmured, and I will. Come, Mr. Frodo, he cried. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you and it as well. So out you go. Come on, Mr. Frodo dear. Sam will give you a ride. Just tell him where to go, and he'll go. As Frodo hung upon his back, arms loosely about his neck, legs clasped firmly under his arms, Sam staggered to his feet, and then to his amazement he felt the burning light. He had feared that he would have barely strength to lift his master alone, and beyond that he had expected to share the dreadful dragging weight of the accursed ring. But it was not so. Whether because Frodo was so worn by his long veins, wound of knife and venomous sting, and sorrow, fear, and homeless wandering, or because some gift of final strength was given to him, Sam lifted Frodo with no more difficulty than if he were carrying a hobbit child, piggyback in some romp on the lawns or hayfields of Shire. He took a deep breath and started off. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Book 6, Chapter 3.
How has the enemy been defeated?
First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for his sight. I suffered a long harrowing by the Grendel, but the heavenly shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere. Not long since it seemed I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses withered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others. A constant distress the counselors entrusted with defending the people's forts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man, with the Lord's assistance, has accomplished something none of us could manage before now for all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labor the Lord of ages bestowed the grace on her. Beowulf lines 929 through 945.
What is truly excellent and glorious?
And may the good gods give you all your heart's desires, husband and house, and lasting harmony too. No finer, greater gift in the world than that. When man and woman possess their home, two minds, two hearts that work as one. Despair to their enemies, a joy to all their friends, their own best claim to glory. The Odyssey, Book 6, lines 198 through 203.
Why do we tell stories?
The brave things in old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo, adventures as I used to call them. I used to think that they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for, because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folks seem to have been just landed in them, usually. Their paths were laid that way, as you put it. But I expect they had lots of chances like us of turning back, only they didn't. Samwise Gamgee, J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Book 4, Chapter 8.
You may be seated. So you just experienced what my humane letters and English students do every day at the very beginning of class. The first thing they do when they walk in is they stand up and we recite. And we're going to talk more about what is a classroom catechism, how do you put one together, what are the benefits. But I want to start with a little bit of background about me. Is this really loud with the microphone, or is it okay? Okay. So I have only been teaching for 3 years. I've been teaching at Memorial Lutheran School in Houston, Texas, which is a classical school. I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. My husband and I were missionaries in Germany. So this is something that I never thought I would actually be doing. I loved literature. I studied English in college. I went on to get an MA in theology and become a deaconess. And when my children started attending Memorial, my husband received a call there. Eventually, Pastor Paul roped me in. So that's just a little bit about me. Just so you know, I'm not like the major expert in the room. So this is what I have found to be helpful, and I would love to see what you think and to talk about what you would like to see happen in your classrooms as well. So my first year of teaching, I was teaching part-time, and I knew that I wanted recitation to be a part of what we did in the classroom every day. That felt to me like part and parcel of classical education. And I wanted it to be beautiful things, beautiful words, beautiful ideas, things that the kids could really hold on to. So the summer before I started teaching, I read Ken Ludwig's How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare, which is fabulous. And he kind of pulls out the best of Shakespeare and incrementally gets you up to doing things like memorizing an entire Hamlet soliloquy, which my kids that year did for the recitation contest for CCLE, actually. So that first year that I was teaching, 6th and 8th grade were both on the medieval cycle. Oh, sorry. And Shakespeare's not medieval, he's Renaissance, but I was like, close enough, let's do Shakespeare. So my 6th and 8th graders rotated through Shakespeare. We started with A Midsummer Night's Dream. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows. And we did that whole passage, and we kept going from there. So I would start them with a couplet, maybe. And then the next week we would add the next part, and then we would add the next part. And once we'd done the whole thing, then we would work towards saying it for a couple weeks without anything in front of them, hopefully get it in there, and go on to the next one. Every so often I would cycle back, and we'd pick up another Shakespeare, or we'd practice the one we had done. So the next year when they came to class, the first thing I did on the first day of school was just started saying them. And they had quite a few of them still down, but they didn't say them all year the year before. They said them in increments. For my 7th graders, they were doing American literature. So we did things like Anne Bradstreet's The Vanity of All Worldly Things. We did some Christmas poetry. I tried to kind of connect it to what we were doing in the classroom. That was harder for them to keep inside their head. Shakespeare has the rhythm, it has the meter, it has rhyming sometimes not, right? Sometimes it's blank verse. But there's just something about Shakespeare that's a little bit easier to keep in there. So the poetry they did not keep as well going from one year to the next, especially because we were rotating through and not saying the same things every year. So I found that was a good way to start class, but it wasn't doing everything I wanted it to do. So a colleague of mine said, hey, let's read Josh Gibbs's Something They Will Not Forget. And so we read it over the summer together. And I really liked the idea of creating a classroom catechism that Gibbs has in there. And then actually, I've started the Masters of Humanities program at the University of Dallas, and we took a classical pedagogy class, and we read excerpts from Gibbs in that class as well, and talked about classroom catechisms. So I think it's kind of a thing that's catching on. I like a lot of what Gibbs said. I didn't like everything that he had in his catechism, so I kind of changed it up to be my own. So I've now done classroom catechisms for 2 years. And again, like I did with the Shakespeare, one of my favorite things to do was on the first day of class, I threw them last year's catechism questions, and they had them, almost 100%. So it was really, really exciting. I should probably do it a little more every so often throughout the year. But at least on that first day back, they had last year's catechism. And so hopefully that means it's sticking a little bit. So what is a classroom catechism? Of course, we're Lutherans, right? So we like catechisms. If you go to the dictionary, it's sort of a very generic. Catechism is a set of questions and answers designed to instruct or impart certain precepts, right? I like to think about it, I would lean towards a more sort of proclamatory understanding of what the catechism is doing, that it's proclaiming things to you about who you are and how you live in the world and how these texts speak to that. And so that's kind of how I think about mine. I also think about it, so right, our Lutheran catechism is a depository of the faith. And you know that once you've got it pretty well down, you're just throwing out phrases from the catechism everywhere you go without even thinking about it. So that's what I hope that this becomes for my students, that it becomes a depository of the good, the true, the beautiful, something proclamatory of ideas, words that are within your discipline that you're teaching. So I am a humanities teacher. It's probably a little bit easier for me to throw one of these together, but I'm going to give you some thoughts about how to do it for math and science as well. So that's what I hope that my catechism is, that they would understand who they are as created human beings, sort of what the general human condition is and what the answer to that human condition is. So, you know, we did Macbeth just now in Humane Letters to Catechism because we read Macbeth. And what's Macbeth about? A man who becomes so obsessed with power that he loses his soul. And he's a good man at the beginning, supposedly, right? So that is a trap that we can fall into. So how can I kind of lead them through that big idea in the catechism? So the catechism is, first of all, grounded in who we are. So you probably noticed my first two questions. The first one is, who are you? And they answer back, I am a created human being. And then that they're redeemed by Jesus Christ. And that's sort of the basis for what we're going to go through. And Gibbs has 7. So his is even longer than mine. And I didn't feel like all of them were totally like Lutheran. So that's why I kind of changed it up a little bit. But you can look at his to see what he does. And then the second question of my catechism kind of goes from there. So Gibbs's 7 premises are foundational for all of his catechisms, and that's what my 2 questions are. They're in every single one. So all of my classes know those first 2 questions, and they say them every year. And so that connects them between classes as well. The questions should tell the students who they are in Christ and what that means, and then also like how these texts that we're working with can maybe speak to that or just speak to life in general. You'll want it to reflect the faith, if you can, and you'll want it to reflect your school culture. So my second question, that list is from our school culture documents. So that's why that's in there. Okay. So the catechism should have questions and answers that are apropos to course content, themes, and again, school culture. For an upper school catechism, I teach 7th and then 9th through 12th. So I think that should be primarily soul-forming rather than factual by this point. So maybe in the younger grades, you're going to add in more facts or definitions of words you want them to have. Things like that. For the upper school, I wanted it to be soul-forming, mind-forming, things that they could carry with them that would be with them in moments where they needed them, similar to what Pastor Price said this morning about hymns. I want mine to be robust and meaty as you experienced. That is hopefully what you experienced, that it was robust and meaty. Maybe you wanted to leave. I want it to be beautiful and proclamatory. So beautiful words, beautiful ideas, and that it proclaims something to the students. I am pretty, big on understanding story as connected to the story and finding that accidental proclamation or on purpose proclamation in story. And so I'm big on talking to my students about story being more than just something that's beating you over the head with like a virtue that you're supposed to know. It should be, this sounds so silly, it should be like organic. I don't care, for lack of a better word. It should be something that they experience that comes to them, and not something real sort of browbeating into them on a daily basis. So it's designed to be a group activity. I think this is really important. Teacher and students together, and I stand in the front of the room, right, and I say the questions. At least for the first part of the year, I say the answers with the kids as well. Usually I lose my voice in about October or November in Houston, and then I drop out and just ask the questions, or I'm not going to make it through the day. But something that I want to do better about next year is going back to me, picking back up with them and saying the answers as well once my voice is in okay shape again. I think it's really important. I help set the pace. I help set the expression. I help them stay together if I'm saying it with them. It is not for a test. I would not recommend all of a sudden be like, and now take out a piece of paper and write the whole catechism. It's worth 100 points. Okay? That's not the purpose of the catechism. So don't make it a test. Don't make it something that has that pressure on it. You have cohesion, you have rhythm as a group, and that hopefully that cohesion and that rhythm that you establish in your classroom catechism affects the way you work together in the classroom for the rest of the period, the class period. I should have brought a clicker. Okay. The classroom catechism is a way of submitting ourselves to the text. We're letting the text speak to us. We're recognizing the wisdom of the past. This is something that's especially important for my school because we do have a senior thesis. And one of the requirements of the senior thesis is that they must have some sources pre-1750 and submit themselves to the past and the wisdom of the past. So we're practicing that every day when we're letting these texts answer big questions for us. We're being shaped by the texts in our mouths, and then hopefully they're going down deep into the heart and the soul and staying there with our students as they think about different things that they go through in life. And the texts explain us. We don't explain the texts. I wanted to put this quote up here because I really, really like it. This drawing of Macbeth was by my son, Thomas. I don't know, he was like 14 when he did that, 15? So the poet's job is not to tell you what happened, but what happens, not what did take place, but what always does take place. He gives you the typical recurring, or what Aristotle calls the universal event. You would not go to Macbeth to learn about the history of Scotland, because it's all wrong anyway. You go to it to learn what a man feels like after he's gained a kingdom and lost his soul. And the quote my son wrote on the back of this paper was, "Come wind, come rack, at least we'll die with armor on our back." And that's sort of like the bottom moment for Macbeth, right? I know this is ridiculous, I don't care, I'm gonna die. And we know that Macbeth is in total despair at that point. So hopefully the classroom catechism is helping students to see what always does happen and how does God deal with that. At least in a humanities one, that's what I'm going for. Okay, so I'm gonna stop for a second because I feel like I'm just, any questions about that part? You can ask questions about that part later too, right? Yes.
So you just start from the beginning, reciting this. Do you then, the text that you have in there, at some point during the year, do you like delve into why you picked that text?
I don't explain anything. No. So we read most of these texts in class. So I let it hit them when we get to it. And then we talk about it. Some of the texts we don't read every year. So last year I read Lord of the Rings with my 10th graders because I read Beowulf with them in 8th grade. And I was like, let's do some Lord of the Rings, which takes a lot longer than I thought it would. So they had Beowulf in the past, and they resonated with it because we had discussed it in the past. But I like for it to hit them when we get to it, and then we talk about it. And usually by the time we get to it, they understand why it's in the catechism, and I don't have to say anything. Yes?
I had actually started the Classroom Catechism last year. And one of the things that I found was the question, if it's very well written, will tell them why it's in the catechism.
Mm-hmm.
So that when they're seeing that text over again, that question continuously tells them why it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't want it to be like totally obvious, but they should be able to, I mean, we're teaching them to interpret text, right? So they should be able to interpret that text and understand how it goes with that question. And writing the questions is really hard. There's even some that like I go back over them now and I'm like, I might tweak that one. You might notice in the 7th grade catechism in front of you that I have not what is love, but how do I know what love is? Why? Because what are the students going to do? What is love? Okay? And they've done it because I forgot to change it in the 11th grade catechism all year long. All year long. But it became sort of, I just let it happen, and it was part of our rapport as a class. And the student wasn't doing it to be disruptive. He would wait for the right moment, go, what is love? And then we would recite. And I was like, I'm going to let this be. I'm going to let this happen. So, but I will change that question for this year. So yeah, questions are, the way you word the questions is very important. And I do have, while I'm on that, I do have more of the 7th grade catechism. That's what I handed out. So I'll put them over on this side thing. And then there's, I think, enough of the 10th grade one, which we did recite. I think there's enough of everything that everybody can have both on the way out if you'd like them. So, yeah, so you'll see how the questions vary on those. There are some on both of those. The 7th grade catechism, I've taught that class and that content for 3 years. So by the time I wrote a classroom catechism for that, I'd actually taught it once. Everything else was new when I was writing the classroom catechism. And I'll talk about that in a minute and why that's more difficult. But my 7th grade one, I feel sort of the most confident in the way it's laid out. And the others will probably get slightly tweaked again this year. Okay, so developing a classroom content or catechism. The first thing I did, I considered school culture. So that was the love, faithfulness, honor, truth, excellence. I wanted to think about, of course, the texts we read have something to say about this, right? So where are those texts? How can I weave them? But how can I do it in a way that proclaims, that hits them, and that doesn't beat them, okay? So that's one thing. Look for texts which beautifully develop those ideas and proclaim them. Consider course content, texts, and themes. And this is where having taught the class once through is very helpful. If you're developing your own content, which I basically do, I mean, I consult things. I think probably a lot of us in this room are like this. I consult things, but I can't force myself into somebody else's voice, so I create my own materials. So it takes me probably a year to really, like, even if I've read through it ahead of time, once you get teaching it, you're like, oh yeah, and this thread is all throughout what we're reading this year. So the year, the first year that you're teaching it, if you're not like, I have to have a classroom catechism right now, just wait and do it the next year. I knew I wanted to implement this, so I did write them last year for classes I was teaching for the first time. Some of them I knew the texts already well enough that I could do it, but they definitely needed more tweaking than classes that I had already taught. And that's okay. You can tweak. So it's easier to do it after you've taught at least once. Look for how A and B overlap and see if you can put that together. Think through the themes and the concepts that you want them to have from your class. You can flag passages or definitions or formulas, right? Or whatever big ideas you want them to have, you can sort of flag those as you're prepping ahead. And I often will write in the margin, classroom catechism, question mark. Would this be a good one, right? So, and then I write down where I said that like, somewhere else. Page, da-da-da, maybe this one for the Odyssey, okay? Think about, is it impactful, is it important, is it true, good, or beautiful, or does it say something important about who we are, or something that they really need to know for your class? Like if they don't know the, I don't know, Pythagorean theorem, I don't know. That's math, isn't it? I'm a science teacher. And they need to know it, put it on there. See, that's why I'm the humane letters student. And then another thing to think about is like, what passage should just everyone know from this piece? Like everyone should just know blank. So this one, when I was developing my classroom catechisms, I love to crowdsource. And I'm sorry, but I kind of love Facebook. And for crowdsourcing. So I got on my Facebook and just said, hey, these are the things we're reading. Anybody have thoughts about what you think they shouldn't miss? And one of my friends said, everyone should know the opening lines of the Odyssey or the Aeneid. It was one of the epics. And I thought, ooh, I can put the opening lines of those things on every catechism, you know. So my 9th grade one has the opening lines of the Iliad. My 11th grade one has the opening lines of the Aeneid. And they got smoked, by the way, by the 3rd graders saying it in Latin last year. It was amazing. And they were like, they're smarter than us. Because they were saying it in English, and they were like, you know, and the little kids were like, woo! I can't say it in Latin, but they were excited. So that's on there. My 12th grade catechism has the opening lines of Paradise Lost. So that really was a nice hook for me. What should everyone know? Everyone should know, blah. Okay, it's going on there. Also, I love Paradise Lost. So the more Paradise Lost, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So consider if foundational fact-based questions are needed. So this would maybe be, in other disciplines, a little bit more important. But for humanities subjects, things like, maybe on my 11th grade catechism, I should have the transcendentalism definition, because we're reading the Scarlet Letter. And even I have to go back and be like, what did these kooks believe? What did these cookie people say? So that might be something that I would go back and add, okay? For science or math, maybe you want to have, you know, formulas on there, maybe something from Euclid, maybe you want to have some quotes from Kepler, I don't know. So you could think about what are the foundational facts or theories or ideas that they need to have in this class. And I know that there's beautiful writing in both math and science. I haven't read it, but I believe it's there because I know that my son read it with his science teacher. So I'm sure there's wonderful things that you can pull that make math seem even more beautiful than people like me understand it to be. My 12th grade catechism does have a couple questions like this. I came back from CCLE last year thinking a lot about beauty and form, and especially because of Dr. Elizabeth Grimpo's presentation. And she defined beauty as a form with surprise, odor with surprise. And I just thought that was really inspiring. And I kept thinking about people like Milton taking the form of an epic, and then the muse isn't the muse, it's the Holy Spirit. And he's going to soar above the Aeonian Mount. And those opening lines of Paradise Lost are taking a form and they're surprising you with it. And that's what makes Paradise Lost beautiful. And sorry, I'm a little obsessed with Paradise Lost. So that's the question. That's one of the questions for my 12th grade catechism. And then, what do they recite as an example? The opening lines of Paradise Lost. So they did have some foundational fact-based questions or theory kinds of questions. Begin at the beginning. So start with your foundational questions that tell the students who they are and whose they are. Gibbs also suggests questions that ground the students in classical ethos. He asks a bunch of questions that list the vices and the virtues. I didn't do that. I used my school culture words. But he does have examples of that, and you can definitely look at those in his book. I do have his book up here. I loaned it to somebody or a succession of people, and I have no idea where mine is. So I borrowed a friend's. So if you want to see it afterwards, I do have it in my bag, but you can't take it because it's not mine. Okay, so I like it to be a little bit subtle. Not all my questions are, but I think that some of them should not be 100% obvious, that it should take a little bit of interpretation. After all, that's what we're doing in Humane Letters. We're interpreting text. You want to think about how the quote answers the question, how the quote answers the question should be arrived at by the student, even if it takes time. I don't know, we read an essay called, Walker Percy wrote it. Now I'm blank on the title. It was in my classical pedagogy class, but the idea of it was that when we sort of encounter something for the first time and it washes over us, there's something different about the way we appropriate it into our soul. And that, like the English teacher who's always analyzed every text, sometimes they need to feel that feeling again, like need to have that moment again where it's hitting you and washing over you. And if I think of the title, I'll say it. I should have put it in my notes. I knew it yesterday and this morning. Like I said, I don't like to explain it. Don't stand up there on the first day and be like, and this means this, and that means that, and right? Just let them keep saying it, and it'll come. Think about flow. So I think essentially what's happened with my classroom catechisms is that I have a sort of general overall thesis for my class and what I want them to get out of the whole year. And that thesis sort of drives the classroom catechism. And then, of course, then you arrange so that your classroom catechism works towards that. Mine often flow from like a problem, a sin or a struggle, into like a proclamation or a hopeful note. So the 7th grade catechism does like deception to truth. Kit wished she had never deceived this man. Henry in Red Badge of Courage is telling lies about how great he is with his love. Okay. So that idea of sort of lying to others and to yourself runs through those books that we read, and then vanity is in several of them as well in that 7th grade catechism. So you'll see a move from like vanity and out from vanity. And then the 10th grade one, despair to hope, was one of the moves in that one. Frodo gets to a point where he despairs, and it's Sam that gives him hope. Hrothgar has despaired. No one can save us from Beowulf. And then the Lord sends a man through, and blessed is the woman who bore that man. I mean, come on, Oh, such good stuff. Okay, sorry. Mix it up. You have more than one quote. If you have more than one from a particular source, they don't have to follow right after each other. You can move them around to fit with the other texts. That's a sign of knowing your content well. The first time I was working on some of these and I hadn't taught it, we just went in order of the books we were reading because that's how far I was prepped, right? And then it got redesigned later on for the next year. Okay, so practice it. You have to say it out loud before you put it in front of them. So practice it and revise. Say it out loud to yourself. Is the timing good? Is the flow good? Then revise it, okay? I was in a little bit of denial about how much Paradise Lost to put on the 12th grade catechism. So this is a theme. So I actually did the first week with them, and then went, we are slogging through this. I need to cut some things from book 3. So think about what you can cut, whole quotes, parts of one. Can you kind of put an ellipsis in there and just get the good stuff out of it? And then you can, I would say about a week into it, if it's just rough, and you're like, okay, yes, I kind of knew that I should have cut that section from Paradise Lost. Go ahead and cut it. I wouldn't go much beyond a week, but I did do that this past year. I cut it down a little bit. My students like me better. But they also got it better. It was too much. It was overwhelming. Okay, benefits of a classroom catechism. Long-term echoes in their lives, hopefully. Maybe they'll know full passages. Maybe they'll only remember echoes. Maybe they'll remember snippets. Okay, so maybe they're having this moment where they're like, I'm gonna lie to my parents. And then they just hear that echo of, but Kit wished she had never deceived this man. And they're like, oh yeah, her uncle was so good to her, and she didn't realize how much he loved her, and she was so sad that she lied. Maybe I shouldn't lie, right? Hopefully that kind of thing happens. Or, maybe I can just at least call to mind Beowulf. I am despairing. It feels like everything is on top of me. Like maybe this is into adult life. Everything's piling on top of me. I can't get out from under this. I'm being devoured. Oh yeah, the Lord sends a rescuer, okay? Remember Beowulf. So hopefully those kinds of things are gonna come back to them even further on. Or maybe they'll just remember the characters, the ideas, or at least the book. I myself, we had our first 4 seniors graduate this year, and one of them is also a church member of ours, and I had the privilege of writing just a little thing for her at the end of the year, and I pulled out Anne of Green Gables. I didn't even teach her that text because I didn't get her until she was older. But, and I pulled out like the bend in the road. Like it's really hard to not know where you're going and to give up things that you love. But the bend in the road is always there, and God is in heaven and all is right with the world. And so that moment I felt like she needed that, and so that was something I pulled out. So hopefully they can think of people like Anne. Is it worth giving up this thing that I love for this person that I love? Yeah, duty's a friend when we look it in the face gladly, right? That's Anne. That's on my 7th grade catechism. It builds community, so it builds community within the individual class. You can use it in other contexts, or they can use it in other contexts. Maybe it gets woven into a history paper. Maybe it gets woven into a letter to a friend. Maybe another classroom teacher unwittingly says, "Who are you?" And they all stand up and start, which has happened. So I'm like, good, if that's what you're going to say to the "who are you," then yay. And that other teacher just let it happen because she knew it was happening. They can, one of my favorite moments is when you actually get to the passage that you've been reciting in the text that you're reading, because usually like one of 3 things happens. So if a student's reading out loud, the student will get there and go, and the eyes will go, and then they'll go into the cadence that we use in class. Or I'll be reading out loud and they'll be like, yeah. Or whoever's reading out loud, everyone will start to say it with them. And it's such a great moment. Either way, right? So it builds a lot of community through those kinds of things. It's also great for classroom management. So you think about your first 5 minutes, everybody comes in, they've been doing who knows what in the hallway, and they're like they haven't seen each other all day. And if I just go, stand up, and if I don't have them at stand up, I have them at who are you? So there might still be a little bit of tittering, and then I go, who are you? And we're in. And then we sit down silently. Now, you probably need to instruct them at the beginning of the year that when we're done with the catechism, we sit down quietly. It's not time to start talking again. So especially my younger grades, my 7th graders, I have to be a little more explicit about that. But in general, it gives them that focus they need. We're in English now. We're in humane letters now. And I'm sitting down and I'm ready. Let's go. It's a good tool for interruptions. This isn't the ideal thing to use, but like if I have a student who's having a hard time and they stay after class and if the talk is going a little bit long, I can be like, especially as the year gets a little further in, so-and-so, go start asking the questions and they'll ask. Or if a faculty member steps in or whoever and says, hey, that discipline thing from earlier, I need to know X before we do whatever with the punishment, I can go, so-and-so, go. Or if I'm having a coughing fit, I can go, so-and-so, go. Maybe, in between coughs. So it's not the ideal way. I mean, you want to be in the front of the room. You want to show that it's important. But if something like that happens, it doesn't mean that class has to grind to a stop. It can go. And you've got like 5 to 8 minutes to get yourself together. So it's a reference point for both content and behavior. as the year goes on, I can say, this is like that passage on our Classroom Catechism. Remember when we said this about Beowulf? That's like this in Macbeth. And then also, it might be for behavior, right? I might be able to just throw out a little snippet from the Classroom Catechism and go, oh yeah. It also builds rapport from year to year between myself and the students, because that catechism was me and them. That was for us that year. And we have our own inside jokes about it, or we have our own little slips that we made of the mouth that we laugh about, or whatever that may be. And my 11th grade class really liked to pound that idiot in Macbeth. And they would say, sometimes I'd be like, please, let there not be a tour going by right now. But those things gave us, it's a silly thing. That's not the only thing I want them to get out of Macbeth, obviously, but it gives us a rapport from year to year. I've also had students who are maybe like heading down the hallway and I'm starting, and they hear last year's catechism, and I'll just kind of see like a little ear, a little smile. I had a day where I had to watch another faculty member's class in my classroom, and we were doing the 9th grade catechism, and the 10th graders started saying it with the 9th graders, so also between groups. It also gives you some flexibility, like if a student is, so every day, my participations are two participation points. Did you come prepared? Were you basically here on time? You won't lose a point. Did you participate well in the Classroom Catechism? Full points, hooray. Were you doing a dance over here? I'm taking away a point. Were you making the Classroom Catechism about you and not about us as a group? Bye-bye point. It's really easy participation points. And then also extra credit opportunities. I know I said don't use it as a test, but if I have a student that's struggling and worried, I'll say, come see me during recess, see how much you can say by yourself, because that's a big challenge to say it by yourself when you've been saying it as a group, or I'll put it on a final. You can write down one thing. All right, so yeah, that is everything. Questions? Am I okay? Yes.
You teach upper grades. Are there any things you would change for lower grades, and how low can you take this?
Yeah, I would not do nearly the length of passages that you guys just did, right? I would probably add more definitions of like keywords that you want them to know. Are we learning about sentences? Put it on there.
Yep.
Are we learning about something about what you need to know about the math multiplication table? Let's put it on there. Or, the doubles wrap, let's put it in there. I would probably still try to find sweet little text, but maybe like 1 or 2 sentences here and there. And I think I would lean towards comforting for, like, I don't think I would drop the hammer as much as I do with like Macbeth, Beowulf.
Yeah.
But I think you could have that interplay in the younger grades, but I would probably maybe just do like a couple sentences of a passage, like Winnie the Pooh. Let's put some Winnie the Pooh on there. Or maybe there's something great in Peter Pan. Or I don't know, what's something else that's lower down? Charlotte's Web.
Make way for ducklings.
Make way for ducklings. Yeah, because we're learning about caring for others, right? So yeah, I think take your content, and I would probably do more fact things in a younger grade, but I would still put a couple nice little passages on there.
Would you still do it for the same amount of time?
No,
Okay.
I would go shorter. So mine, it probably felt very long today. The first few weeks, it is long. My students, the passage or the handout that you received, they received their own copy. They lose them for the first couple of weeks. Have some extras. And I started saying just put it in your portfolio because that stays in the room. But they have this in front of them. And by most classes that are not goofing off, and especially the classes that are already more cohesive together, classes are just different. A lot of them have it by November, and I can put it in the Grandparents' Day program. And they're reciting in the Grandparents' Day program. So, but yeah, I would go, so this, which took us probably, 8-10 minutes, probably takes more like 5 to 7 in class once they've got it, but you have to put the time in. Yes?
How do you deal with when they're doing it just automatically,
Mm,
because they know it so well,
mhm.
that they're looking off at other things or not really paying attention to the words that they're actually saying.
Yeah,
Because when we were doing it last year, towards the second half of the year, I really struggled with that.
yeah,
Because I've got 7th graders,
right.
and they're just,
7th grade is hard. Yes, they are my hardest ones. Yeah, so that group, and what happens with them too, I think, is I want to be the center of attention, and I can't be the center of attention when we're saying a classroom catechism. And so they're pretending to floss over here, or they're not paying attention, or they're whatever. So usually what I will do is, this is gonna sound really awful. If they want attention, I turn them around, put them in the back of the room facing backward. If they don't like attention, I make them come stand next to me. I will also stop them. I'll just be like, stop. You sound like robots. What's happening in this passage? So that's the moment where maybe I'm explaining something or reminding them, like, what does this mean? And I, again, model expressive speaking. 7th graders will also try to go the other way, right? And be over the top. And then again, I will say, stop. You need to come back like 2 points. And then, if I'm getting to that point where I've had to stop them more than once, bye-bye participation point.
okay.
And that hurts because it's supposed to be easy to get. Yes.
So, do we do, like, for all of our literature for the year, do we go ahead and just implement the passages of all the literature at the beginning of the year, or do you change it up per quarter, or how do you do that?
This is the full thing, and they get it on day 1.
Okay.
And they do the whole thing all year. And they didn't believe me at first. They were like, you're changing it second semester, right? And I was like, no, you're gonna know this stuff, and it's gonna be down deep inside your soul, and someday it's gonna come out, right? And they were like, what? It's like, nope, you're gonna know it. You're really going to know it. So we say this from day 1 the whole year long.
How long are your class periods?
40 minutes. Yeah.
So do you ever skip it any days?
There have been, I skipped it way too much with 12th grade because I was nervous about senior thesis the first year.
Yeah.
Way too much. I really regret it because they're gone now. Done. But there are times where, like, there's a fire drill in the middle of it, and I'm just like, okay, we'll come back up and get started, right? Or maybe they really struggled with something that they were supposed to have written by today, and I just need to be giving them individual attention. I might do it, but I try really hard not to.
And do more teachers in your school do catechisms, or are you the only one?
I think I'm currently the only one.
Well, I do sort of an elementary
Use
sort
your
of
one.
version,
Yeah.
but it's not all literature based. It's more, a couple of lines on the history timeline and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
And yours is long.
Mine is
She
crazy
teaches
long.
5th grade.
So, do you have any words for those of us who are overly ambitious and end up, my 5th graders had almost 45 minutes memorized, and I should do better and be kinder for this next year.
So-
When did you do that?
Yeah.
When did you have them do that? That catechism? Or was that for different classes? When you say
So-
45 minutes,
With elementary, right, I have them,
Yeah, you have them.
the whole day?
and it would be more incremental. So the first week, this is what they're gonna say, and then the next week, a lot of it's review, summarizing,
Yeah.
what do we know about the Mesopotamians?
Yeah.
Or a quote about Egypt is the gift of the Nile. The Nile is 3,000 miles long, which is about the distance between Europe and North America. Just something.
Yeah, I would, like she said, I would incrementalize with younger kids. And so then you could maybe go longer.
And then you would just practice the 7 minutes that's most recent, or you would go back and review the first 7. So like we memorized 3 Psalms. The Psalms would be part of it, but we would.
And little kids, their brains are better with that than older kids, right? So I feel like my older kids need it. I had one back there.
Yeah, I had multiple subjects with the same kids, But what this did, it was only just a couple of questions at the beginning of each class. But what it did was it separated out those classes really well. So if you've got a couple of different subjects that you're doing with the same kids
Yeah.
back to back without any really break, you get that great transition from, okay, math is done, we're moving on to Latin.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes.
So my question is, I have 2 high school boys, and they have become pretty well versed in classical education since our school has transitioned more to that model. And they have said to me multiple times, we thought the grammar stage was for memorizing, and that once we're in high school, we could go on to more interesting things and discussions. And they were, they feel burdened by a lot of recitation.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if your students just pick up on your enthusiasm and they then don't feel burdened by it, or what you might say to them.
Some of them feel burdened by it.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not an outside class activity. It is in class only. I never say to them, you have to go home and practice this. You have to go home and memorize this and come back tomorrow with it memorized. Never, ever. It's what we do together. Now, if there's a student that struggles with reading and is having a hard time keeping up, I might suggest that they go and read it over outside of class every so often. It is not homework. It is not something I test on. It's not something they have to go outside the classroom and do at all. It's what we do together, first 5 to 8 minutes. They are getting used to it. So there were some that were resistant at the beginning, but now they just know this is what we do in this room.
They know what to expect.
They know what to expect. We do this in this room, and that's what we do every day. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll just stand until I start. They won't even sit down before I start. So you're just setting that expectation. They get used to it. Hopefully some of my enthusiasm is imbibed, but they're high school, so I don't think always, but most of my groups have taken to it very nicely over the last few years.
With that whole not testing part and it being just a part of what we do as a class, we have a recitation night twice a year where the kids get to show their parents what they have done.
Yeah.
And the portions of the class catechism that we did, I actually did that with them.
Yeah.
Like I included myself in the, normally it's just them before their parents, but I was like, this is actually stuff we've done together
Yeah.
all year.
Yeah.
And it's something I needed just as much as them. And so I did it with them at recitation.
Yeah, that's a great point, doing it with them. And it does become special. Not every kid is going to feel that way because not every kid feels that way about anything in school. But most of the time, as a class, as a group, it becomes something special between us. And even the joking about, can't we just sit down today? Stand up. But that can be lighthearted too, and they still stand up.
Do you ever get weary of it?
No. Now, when my voice is dying,
Yeah,
that's rough. But no, I don't. And, but I love this stuff. So,
I did have to fight the urge sometimes of we don't have enough time.
yes.
And I had to stop myself from being like, I have to give up this because we're running behind because I missed what time it was on the clock. And then it'd be like, no. They'd look at me and be like, we're going to stand up, right?
Yeah, why aren't we standing
Yes, we are. You're right. We're going to stand up, we're going to do this, and then we'll figure out the rest of it.
Yeah, and it's so valuable. Yeah.
So do you put it up on the board or anything for them at the
No.
beginning, or they just read it from their paper?
They read it from their paper. Yeah. The first year when I was just doing poetry, we read it from a screen. But they have a paper, they read it from paper. Now, Gibbs makes them copy the whole Classroom Catechism by hand. I have not done that. We've not done that.
We had a booklet that, a pamphlet booklet, 8.5, folded in half,
Yeah.
that had all of the questions for the entire day. I did not, however, make them write it out.
Yeah.
I did, because I just had some time, I actually also included some pictures.
Okay.
And iconography and stuff like that, just because
Yeah.
I had the room
Which would be a
throughout the
helpful
catechism.
mnemonic device too. Yeah. So that's a great idea. I like that idea. Yes.
We had just a 9th grade catechism that we kind of alternated. It was just me and pastor, that we were the only 2 teachers, so we just traded off days who said it.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to write it in like their commonplace notebook at the
Uh-huh.
beginning. And they knew it because Pastor wrote most of it. They knew it better the first day we were reading it than I actually did. He gave it to them ahead of time, and then they came first class, and they read their handwritten version instead of the printed version.
Yeah. And they had a leg up because they were really looking at it, and you
Yeah,
have to
they
read
had-
stuff more than once to copy it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be a valuable thing. Maybe someday in the future I'll add it in. They might, I don't know, mute me on me. Where's Colleen? But,
I will say part of that is also knowing your kids.
yeah.
Because I know, like, there's a few of my boys that if I told them they had to write it out, that would have soured the entire experience for us.
Yeah. So yeah, know your kids, know your class. But I have found it to be very valuable. I have found it to give us something that we're bonding over that has to do with the subject matter, and that goes from year to year with us, and that knits a class together as a whole. So we're at time, we're about 15 minutes before chapel, but my email addresses are there. I'm happy to send you other examples of ones that I've done. I love feedback, so if you see something on mine that you're like, why did you do that? Please let me know. I love feedback. So feel free to email me, and thank you very much for having me today. And I'm going to check the one there over there, the humane letters too that we said together is over there.